If you haven't seen the movie It Chapter 2 yet, then you're right to be scared because there are spoilers ahead. Spooky spoilers. But spoilers aren't the only scary thing in this video, because we're going to be talking about some of the most frightening moments from the movie. What's more terrifying than a giant clown monster that feeds off your fears? How about a giant fear-eating clown monster with spider legs? We'll kick things off with our pick for most terrifying Chapter 2 moment, and later we'll talk about which supposed scares just fell flat. Fortune cookies. During It Chapter 2, the losers visit the Jade of the Orient Chinese restaurant for a nice reunion dinner. Well, at least it's nice until they all remember Pennywise, and then things get pretty intense for the characters and downright awful for the audience. Listen, we aren't gonna say that looking at bad CGI is as awful as being chased around by a fear-eating monster, but we're gonna complain about it anyway. The characters end their meal with fortune cookies, which reveal the sad, sad fate of their friend Stanley. And then the fortune cookies turn out to have monsters inside of them. And no, we're not making that up. That's actually what happens in the movie. The creatures that spew forth from the fortune cookies look terrible, and not good, scary, terrible, just the regular kind. To make the scene even worse, it kind of reminds us of a scary dinner scene which was much more successful. Even the shrimp hand puppets from Beetlejuice managed to look better and elicit a bigger reaction than the CGI monstrosities in this scene. Paul Bunyan. In the first movie, it was scary watching the various members of the Losers Club get tormented by it as children, but during Chapter 2, it just didn't have the same impact, because the stakes were so much lower. From the very beginning of the scene, you know that Pennywise isn't going to win because we've seen everyone in the Losers Club as an adult. The fact that we know the kid survives automatically makes the scene less scary than it would be otherwise. But that being said, there are definitely some flashbacks which are better than others, and the one involving Richie at least deserves an honorable mention. Not only was it one of the better scenes, but it's also one of Stephen King's favorite scenes, and who are we to argue with him? In this scene, Richie runs into the town's statue of Paul Bunyan, which comes alive and chases him. To give credit where credit's due, the way Paul Bunyan's mouth opens up is actually pretty creepy, and it's a lot better than some of the other less than stellar special effects in the movie. Hall of Mirrors. In the first movie, Bill was the leader of the Losers Club, which is kind of a dubious honor to be honest. As an adult, he's a successful author, even though he apparently can't write a decent ending. Geez, we wonder who that's based on. But as an adult, Bill somehow has even less common sense than when he was a kid. He's concerned about a little boy who claims to hear voices coming from his drain, which is definitely alarming. However, Bill decides to handle the issue by grabbing and shaking the kid in the middle of the street in broad daylight while yelling about how the kid needs to get his family to leave Derry and never come back. Whew, that was a great plan, Bill. Can't believe that didn't work. And then Bill stalks this kid to the carnival and then follows him inside the Hall of Mirrors. Man, if it turned out Bill was the bad guy all along, that actually would have been a pretty good twist. But instead, Bill runs around, gets lost in a Hall of Mirrors, goes past some clowns that look a whole lot like Tim Curry, and then does his best to save the kid from Pennywise. It's a pretty standard horror sequence, but it gets the job done. Buried alive. Being deprived of oxygen is a primal fear that many of us worry about on occasion, which is why this scene from It Chapter 2 hits so dang hard. Beverly finds herself back in the bathroom stall of her old school, which is the last place most of us want to take our final breath. Not only was this scene scary for Beverly and the audience, but even actress Jessica Chastain admits it was terrifying. The fake blood was absolutely freezing. It was sticky, and as a bonus, Jessica couldn't see when it covered her face. It also scared her because the rest of the cast and crew couldn't see her if something were to go wrong. But the end result was a fairly scary scene when tied into another breathless moment for a Losers Club member. Ben Hanscom got to experience what many of us consider a top 10 fear, which is being buried alive. Of course, Pennywise makes sure to drive home the point that not only is he being buried alive, but he's being buried alive and all alone. It even tosses in a few more unwarranted fat jokes. Although that seems like that should barely register, what with him being buried alive and all. Seriously, Ben, get some sense of priorities here. Get some oxygen, and then get the girl. The Leper. In the lead-up to It Chapter 2, we found interviews with director Andy Muschietti to be pretty reassuring. He often stated that he prefers to use practical effects over CGI whenever possible, since they often elicit more visceral responses from audiences and actors. Yet, as we'll get into later, a lot of the CGI in this movie was just kind of cringe-inducing, which is why Eddie's childhood tormentor stands out as being one of the better frightening entities in the movie. Yeah, the leper Eddie was so scared of as a kid is back, and frankly, he's just as scary this time around. The adults all have flashbacks to their time in Derry as children, and Eddie's involves him being at the local pharmacy. He visits the basement, where there are tons of improperly kept syringes, random IV bags, and other stuff that you don't have to be a germaphobe to cringe at. But the leper in this scene makes a strong case for practical effects, and to make the scene even grosser, it involves him and Eddie's mom. Frankly, one of the scariest things about the whole movie is that Eddie's mother and wife are both played by the same actress, Molly Atkinson. Growing up and literally marrying your mother? Now that is scary. Henry Bowers. Frankly, even before it got directly involved with him, Henry Bowers was a scary guy, even as a child. Let's not forget that in Chapter 1, he actually carved an H into Ben's stomach, because, that's a totally normal kid thing to do. With some, encouragement from Pennywise, he takes out his father, which earns him a long stay in a mental institution where we find him in Chapter 2. While most people view those red balloons as a harbinger of doom, Henry is stoked that Pennywise is back. Now he can go back to tormenting the Losers Club again, which is even sadder and scarier since they're all adults now. Yeah, Pennywise and his various forms are scary, but as the losers prove over and over again, all you have to do is not fear him, and then he'll go away pretty much. Sure, it's easier said than done, but no amount of wishing away Henry Bowers makes him any less real or any less dangerous. So when Henry manages to corner Eddie in his bathroom, it's downright frightening. It's an enclosed space. Henry's completely out of his mind, and he has a sharp blade. Although Eddie does manage to escape, so does Henry, who shrugs off a serious wound as if it was just nothing. Bleachers. Even if you're not a fan of kids in real life, you have to admit there's just something about seeing them in horror movies. Maybe it's because they're generally pretty defenseless, or maybe it's part of our natural instincts to want to protect them, but the stakes always seem higher when a little kid's involved in horror movies. Especially when they're as cute as the little girl from It Chapter 2. She interacts with Adrian in the carnival scene at the beginning of the movie, which helps endear her to the viewers. Unfortunately for her, she later gets lured under some bleachers by Pennywise while possibly the world's most oblivious mom sits by without noticing her daughter getting up and walking away. As if Vicki wasn't already cute and sympathetic enough, she confides to Pennywise, possibly the world's worst confidant, that she gets bullied because of a birthmark on her cheek. When Pennywise says he could simply blow it away, she eagerly approaches him and, well, even if you haven't seen the movie, you could probably guess how that ended for her. Fridge. In the world of comic books, fridging a character means having something horrible happen to them in order to inspire other characters to act. Just like how losing Vanessa in the beginning of Deadpool 2 drives pretty much everything Wade does in that movie. But in the world of Stephen King, fridging a character just means putting him in an old fridge so they can pop out and scare everyone later. In the first movie, there was a great scene in which Pennywise the Dancing Clown emerges from a refrigerator, and we got to see a callback to that moment in It Chapter 2. Only this time it was the body of young Stanley in the fridge, and he had some extra accessories. And by accessories, we mean his head had spider legs coming out of it. Decomposing bodies are already pretty spooky, but when they're talking and scuttling around on spider legs, they're even more so. Fans of the novel know that its default physical form is a spider, so it's fitting that this spidery scene is one of the scariest ones in the movie. Also, did anyone else notice how shockingly similar that entire sequence was to the spider head scene in John Carpenter's The Thing? Mrs. Kersh. This scene probably would have been a whole lot scarier if we didn't already see it in the final trailer for the movie, or if it wasn't so much like the scene from the miniseries. But okay, we'll admit that the scene in which Beverly Marsh visits her childhood home is pretty unsettling. It checks all those boxes for things that frighten us: a character moving unnaturally, the vague sense that something is horribly wrong, and being stuck in a conversation with an elderly person. Yeah, we know, it scared us too. And as if all that wasn't bad enough, we were treated to some of Beverly's childhood memories involving her awful, horrible nightmare of a father. Again, that's the kind of unsettling real-life thing that frightens both the characters of the movie and the audience. Honestly, the lead up to this scene was solid, but we have to subtract major points for how awful Mrs. Kersh looked when she turned into a big ol' CGI monster. But there was a redeeming moment when Beverly found herself face to face with Pennywise before he could put on his makeup, which was actually pretty spooky. Bridge scene. The most terrifying and gut-wrenching scene of It Chapter 2 happens right out of the gate. Some films like to take time to ramp up the scares, but this film got to it right away. Sure, giant dancing clowns are spooky, but the most unsettling movie moments are often grounded in realism. The infamous bridge scene is an important part of Stephen King's novel It, which wasn't included in the 1990 miniseries. It involves a young man named Adrian Mellon who is the victim of a horrendous hate crime in which he's tossed from a bridge. And sure, the parts of the clown are scary. The bridge is covered in Pennywise's signature red balloons. There's a cryptic warning to the losers left behind. Oh, and Pennywise takes a big bite out of poor Adrian. But the truly upsetting part is how realistic that scene is. Well, except for the clown and the balloons thing. It's based on a real crime committed against a man named Charlie Howard in the town of Bangor, Maine. I mean, we all know that, especially in the comforting light of day, that giant spider clowns aren't real. But this kind of hatred and violence is sadly all too real. And that is what makes the bridge scene truly terrifying. Which one of these movie moments did you find the most terrifying? Or was it one that we missed? Tell us which scenes from It Chapter 2 managed to scare you, and which ones left you rolling your eyes. Before you go, make sure to click on that subscribe button for more great videos from us here at CBR. And hey, thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.